Maledictus is a horror and creepypasta narration podcast. All pieces read on the Maledictus podcast are either in the public domain, share-alike licensed, or used with explicit written consent from the author. Listener discretion is advised.
Maledictus, fear the night. Maledictus, holy might. Suffer cruel, doomed in fright. Maledictus, eternal light.
The following podcast is brought to you in part by our partnership with W Energy Drink. What is this W that everyone is talking about lately? W is a clean energy drink that is made to give you focus with no crash, jitters, or angst like those other energy drinks. Perfect for those late night ghost hunting expeditions or listening to scary stories that will terrify you in the dark. W contains vitamins, amino acids, nootropics, and 150 milligrams of caffeine for that extra energy boost. It contains absolutely zero sugar, no fillers, no artificial colors or dyes, no secret formulas, hidden ingredients, and is 100% gluten-free. Drink comes out to about $1 per drink or less. It's much cheaper than those other canned energy drinks. Even better, if you use our promotional code Maledictus at checkout, you will receive 10% off your order. And it helps to support our podcast. So order W today and be better.
This podcast may contain adult themes or adult situations. Viewer discretion is advised.
Harmony, written by Sean DeMarco, narrated by Mal Fortuna. Harmony dumped the last can of generic ravioli in a dented stained pot on the ancient gas stove, her stomach grumbling with a fierce intensity. It was the third day her mother had been gone, leaving the small, fragile 11-year-old girl to fend for herself in their isolated, dilapidated old house at the edge of the foreboding forest. She had to drag a rickety wooden chair, its paint chipped and peeling, across the linoleum floor to reach the knob and turn on the burner. The clicks of the igniter sounded unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence of the kitchen. As she waited for her meager meal to heat up, tendrils of steam slowly rising from the pot, Harmony's haunted eyes drifted to the dusty framed photo on the cracked and stained kitchen counter. Her father in a crisp army uniform, his kind, gentle eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled, that warm, reassuring smile that always made her feel safe. Her heart ached with a profound, unrelenting grief as she looked at it, tears threatening to spill down her pale, gaunt cheeks. He had died in service overseas when she was only 6, and her mother had never been the same since. Descending into a bottomless spiral of despair and addiction, she started drinking heavily, the pungent scent of cheap whiskey always on her breath, and disappearing for days at a time, leaving Harmony alone with her unanswered questions, her gnawing, relentless grief, and an empty, echoing fridge. Pop! The lid of the ravioli burst open with a sudden, jarring noise, splattering watery, unseasoned tomato sauce across the photograph, obscuring her father's kind face. Harmony gasped, a small choke sound, and quickly grabbed a frayed, threadbare dish towel, carefully dabbing at the red specks marring the image of her father. "Sorry, Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling and barely audible. "I miss you so much." Harmony ate her meager, tasteless meal in front of the flickering, static-filled screen of an ancient television set, a bulky, heavy CRT model that was probably older than she was. It sometimes flickered and fuzzed with distorted pixel artifacting, the colors bleeding and merging in a psychedelic swirl. but it was better than the suffocating silence that permeated the house. Once the comforting, familiar sounds of cartoons faded away, Harmony dragged herself up the creaking stairs to a dusty, cobweb-filled attic, searching for something, anything, to occupy her restless, lonely mind. As she rummaged through the musty boxes of forgotten relics and discarded memories, her fingers brushed against something unfamiliar, a box that seemed to emanate an otherworldly chill. Harmony pulled it out, wiping away a thick layer of dust to reveal a board game that she had never seen before. It was labeled an Angel Board, a cheap knockoff imitation of the classic Ouija board she had glimpsed in those late-night horror movies she wasn't supposed to watch. The board itself was a thick yellow piece of cardboard, embellished with ornate red lettering and strange esoteric symbols. The planchette was a simple piece of off-white plastic, shaped like a pair of angelic wings. A desperate, fragile hope bloomed in Harmony's chest as she reverently lifted the board from its box, her fingers trembling slightly. "If Daddy is with the angels now, maybe I can use this to talk to him?" she whispered to herself, her voice small and fragile in the oppressive stillness of the attic. She carried the board down to the living room, the wooden stairs groaning under her light footsteps, and set it down on the dusty, scratched surface of the old coffee table. With shaking hands, she placed the planchette in the center of the board just as the faded, worn instructions dictated, and gently rested her fingertips on its cool, smooth surface. "Hello? Angels? My name is Harmony, and I'm trying to reach my daddy. Can you hear me?" Her voice quivered as she spoke, a trembling whisper filled with desperate longing. She waited for a response, seconds ticking by like hours in the deafening silence of the room. When no response came, Harmony nudged the planchette with her fingers, urging it to move. "Daddy? Are you there? It's me, Harmony. I miss you so much. Please, if you can hear me, give me a sign." Still, the planchette remained motionless, and Harmony felt a crushing wave of disappointment and despair wash over her. Choking back a sob, she left the board on the table and retreated to her room, clutching her tattered sketchbook to her chest. She spent the next few hours pouring her grief and loneliness onto the pages, drawing picture after picture of herself and her father, reunited in a bright, colorful world far away from her darkness and the pain of her reality. As night fell and the shadows grew long and deep, Harmony found herself drawn back to the angel board, an inexplicable, irresistible compulsion guiding her steps. She approached it cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest, and saw that the planchette had moved, no longer resting in the center of the board. Now, it sat in the upper corner, the tips of its plastic wings pointing to the word yes. A thrill of fear and excitement raced through Harmony's veins as she stared at the board, hardly daring to breathe. With a trembling finger, she reached out and touched the planchette once more. Daddy, is that you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the thundering of her own heartbeat. Slowly, as if guided by an unseen hand, the planchette began to move, gliding across the board in a jerky, halting motion. Harmony watched, transfixed, as it spelled out a message, Letter by painstaking letter. I. A. M. H. E. R. E. I am here. Tears of joy and relief streamed down Harmony's face as she read the words, a feeling of warmth and love blossoming in her chest. She spent the next few hours communicating with the entity that claimed to be her father, pouring out her heart and soul, sharing her deepest fears and her most cherished memories, her desperate longing to be with him again. As the night wore on and the temperature dropped, Harmony began to shiver. The thin, threadbare fabric of her pajamas doing little to ward off that bone-chilling cold that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. The wind picked up outside, howling through the eaves like a tortured animal, and in the distance, the mournful baying of wolves echoed through the trees. It sent shivers down Harmony's spine. Reluctantly, she said goodbye to her father, promising to talk to him again soon, and made her way upstairs to her bedroom, the ancient floorboards creaking and groaning with every step. She crawled into her narrow, lumpy bed, clutching her favorite stuffed animal, a worn and patched teddy bear that had been a gift from her father on her 5th birthday. As she lay there, staring into the darkness, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, a malevolent presence lurking just beyond the edges of her perception. Sleep eluded her, her mind racing with a jumble of fearful thoughts and half-formed nightmares. She tossed and turned, tangling herself in the thin, scratchy sheets, until finally, as the first pale light of dawn crept through the curtains, she fell into a fitful, troubled slumber. She awoke with a start, her heart pounding to the sound of something heavy and solid slamming against the walls downstairs. For a moment, she lay frozen, paralyzed with fear, listening intently for any further noise. The house was silent, save for that creaking of ancient timbers and that mournful whistling of the wind outside. Harmony tried to convince herself that it was just the house settling, that old buildings made strange noises at times. But deep down, in the primal, instinctive part of her brain, she knew that something was wrong. The air felt thick and heavy, charged with an electric sense of menace, and the shadows in the corners of her room seemed to writhe and dance with a malevolent intelligence. She huddled under the covers, shaking with terror as heavy, uneven footsteps began to thump up the stairs, drawing closer and closer to her room. And then she heard it, a wet, rattling breath, the sound of lungs laboring to draw in air through a throat filled with fluid. It was a sound no human could make, a sound that belonged to something ancient and evil and utterly inhuman. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, and Harmony heard that distinctive creak of the loose floorboard just outside her bedroom door. She held her breath, her entire body rigid with fear, as the doorknob began to turn slowly, inexorably, the metal grinding and squealing in protest. The door swung open with a long, drawn-out creak, and Harmony found herself staring into the darkness of the hallway beyond, her wide, terrified eyes straining to make out the shape of the thing that stood there. For a moment, there was nothing, just an inky, impenetrable blackness that seemed to swallow the very light, and then 2 glowing red eyes appeared in the darkness, burning with a hellish, malevolent fire. Harmony opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out, her throat constricted with terror. She watched helpless as the thing in the doorway took a shuffling, lurching step forward, its movements jerky and unnatural, as though it was a puppet being controlled by an unseen hand. As it moved into the moonlight spilling through her bedroom window, Harmony saw the thing clearly for the first time, and the sight of it was enough to shatter her sanity into a million jagged pieces. It was wearing her father's face, the skin stretched tight and modeled over a skull that was too large, too elongated to be human. But the eyes, those burning, hellish eyes, belonged to something else entirely, something ancient and evil and utterly, incomprehensibly alien. The thing's mouth opened, revealing a maw filled with jagged, needle-sharp teeth, and it spoke, its voice a guttural, rasping mockery of her father's warm, loving tones. "Harmony," it croaked. "Daddy's home." Harmony screamed, a high, piercing wail of terror and despair that seemed to go on forever. She rolled off the bed, landing hard on the floor, and scrambled backwards, desperate to put as much distance as possible between herself and that horrific thing that had once been her father. The creature lunged forward, its movements jerky and erratic, and swiped at her with its hands that ended in a twisted, razor-sharp claws. Harmony felt a searing pain across her chest as the claws tore through her flesh, leaving deep, ragged gashes that immediately began to ooze dark, thick blood. Sobbing and gasping for breath, Harmony staggered to her feet and ran, blindingly pushing past the creature and out the hallway. She half fell, half tumbled down the stairs, the aged wood splintering and cracking beneath her weight, and burst out the front door into the chill night air. She ran, her bare feet pounding against the cold, damp earth, the branches of the tree tearing at her skin and clothes as she plunged headlong into the forest. Behind her, she could hear the creature crashing through the underbrush, its heavy, labored breathing drawing closer and closer with every passing second. Harmony ran until her lungs burned and her muscles screamed in protest, until the world around her began to blur and spin from exhaustion and blood loss. Just when she thought she could go no further, she spotted a small, dark opening at the base of a massive gnarled tree, a hollow just big enough for a terrified child to squeeze into. She crawled into the cramped, musty space, pulling her knees up to her chest and trying to quiet her ragged, gasping breaths. Outside, she could hear the creature thrashing and howling as it searched for her, its enraged screams echoing through the night. And beneath that, growing louder and more distinct with every passing moment, there was another sound, the long, mournful howling of wolves, drawing closer and closer to her hiding place. Harmony closed her eyes, hot tears streaming down her cheeks, and prayed to anyone or anything that might be listening for salvation, for protection, for a way out of this waking nightmare. But in her heart, she knew that there would be no help coming. No miraculous rescue or deus ex machina to save her from the horrors that stalked the night. She was alone, lost in the dark, with monsters on all sides and no way out. And as the howls of the wolves grew louder and the crashing footsteps of the creature drew nearer, Harmony felt a terrible, yawning darkness opening up inside her, a black hole of despair and hopelessness that threatened to swallow her whole. And in that moment, as the jaws of some nameless horror closed around her and the world fell away into a red mist of pain and terror, Harmony knew that she would never escape this place, that the nightmare would go on and on forever and ever, until the last light of hope and sanity gutted out and she was lost forever in an endless, eternal darkness.